relevant literature. So you may remember at the end of last week's session, we kind of came to a point where we started to look at something called culture. And I said that I would like you to work through the handbook chapters. And in particular, this was as well a preparation for starting your literature review for your paper that you're writing, right? So a few of you probably still did agree the title with me last week. But by now you should start identifying relevant research papers and kind of starting to analyze them. And that doesn't mean that you have to read all the articles from front page to the back page, but instead like search them for relevant information that is relevant for you. So I gave you the homework of reading Nicolini's research paper and ask you what lessons you can learn from this. So if you haven't done this, make sure you do this this week at some point, because this corresponds kind of to chapter 2. So this is again the student handbook. So this was the initial reading exercise. How can we search papers or relevant articles, just as a rough idea? How do you do it normally? Do you hammer it into Google Scholar? It's already a good start. Maybe Nora? Did you use keywords, or do you just go with sentences or words that make sense to you? Well, what do you use?
Keywords.
Yeah, keywords? So how do you find keywords? This is tricky, right? We have an association with something, so we may hammer in project management just to be sure that it's like kind of relevant to our degree course, yeah? But then it's organization, culture, and then you see it's a never-ending list, 26 million hits. And you're like, no, this is the weekend gone. No, something like that, right? So how do you refine? What is a trick?
You need to narrow down your topic.
Yeah, spot on. So how do you do this?
You need to find your assumption and your research purpose first.
Yeah, so you're already on the right track, so you can refine it more, yeah? So kind of identify your assumptions. What does actually the keyword do for you? Yeah, organization, we talked here about culture, so you could think about our questionnaire survey, which had to do with values, right? Heroes, you remember? Yeah, so you could use something like that as keywords, and I would probably return quite a few searches. But the heroes, you would probably notice it's not a keyword that is academically considered. So you would probably have in text hits, but not the relevant keyword hits. Yeah, but this is another strategy. So another strategy is literally go for phrases that seem relevant to you, and so search those. Yeah, you just have to make sure with Nora that your actually searches were in text, not just keywords. Yeah, because that can create strange things. Particularly if your phrase is, for example, project chemistry, you potentially go in the chemical libraries there, yeah? So this could backfire on a large scale, yeah? Other ways? How else could we search for relevant papers? How do you search relevant papers?
You already have a paper, look at those references.
Yes. Yeah, so spot on, yeah. So you can kind of do paper mining. I'm not sure that is an accurate scientific term for that. But the idea is, if you have a relevant article, you look at their references, right? And use this as a core reference to build your understanding on. Yeah, and then maybe as well your argument, yeah. Okay, so with Nicolini's paper, it was actually single authorship, so he won a paper prize in 2002 for most kind of inspiring paper, and I've given you kind of a few key pointers. Now be careful, many books we read for general understanding, so we like the introduction, we think like, wow, they're referring to relevant stuff, but in papers we often have an explicit knowledge claim, yeah, and that is often kind of set in the conclusions, in the abstract, and they're repeated a few times. Now the knowledge claim is actually the one that is empirical. So the arguments, or as well the narrative, may not be empirically sound. That may be contradictory, yeah, but you're basing your argument on previous set information. Yeah, so this is quite important. What was the paper about? Has anybody read it? Project Chemistry? Okay, so well, if it's as well early in the morning, I have to admit I'm struggling at the moment a little bit what it was about. So I have written it down, yeah? The question really that I saw in that paper is how does successful management of people fit into the scenario as put forward by Nicolini, and he kind of points towards the interpersonal relationship. Yeah, he says that if you have a team where you create interpersonal relationships, then you arrive at something better. Yeah, it may not be more productive, but a happy organization. It's a little bit what you kind of pointed out last session. Yeah, so if we have a healthy relationship that is functional and you can improve it to 70% organizational happiness, yeah, so 100 is maybe utopical, then you may have a team spirit and collaboration that will actually enhance your performance. Now he talks as well in particular relationship dimensions and factors that may lead to successful project performance. Now he actually identifies the project performance as well in a particular way. So yeah, in a way I have kind of done the analysis here. So project chemistry in his definition is then the metaphor to highlight a particular aspect of business and work practices about the inherent risk as well. With chemistry comes the challenge of risk. It may not be the fully managed, controlled environment with a black box hidden internal in the project environment, or perhaps developing. Yeah. Well, what do you think the black box could be? If you are the manager, well, what could be the danger? What is a black box here? Or what do you think the project chemistry is?
Maybe a conflict between the team members?
You're spot on. Yeah. So he refers here to the chemistry actually between the team members, but as well between the team members and the manager potentially. Yeah. And as a manager, you may not always be aware of the dynamics. Yeah. So tensions may be built on notions of conflict that you as a manager find very healthy, yeah, because you are like, oh, we are on here to something. This will be better if we figure this conflict out. But your team members may not appreciate conflict as a constructive process to create something new. Yeah? So this can be actually a potential dilemma. Now, okay, I won't go much further, but make sure you work through chapter 2 as a reference. And yeah, I said already earlier, I'm not too well, so I'm not sure if I actually survived the full 2 hours today. So the seminar is kind of postponed into homework, so make sure you're working through chapters 3 and 4. Those are the corresponding chapters in the student handbook. Now by the, yeah? Hello?
Sorry, the book that you recommended is not in the library.
It is. I had a look, it was just not attached to my reading list.
So which one is that? Which book is that for that? Sorry.
Organizational Communication. We can discuss that afterwards. You will see on the reading list, if you click today, you will see it links to the books.
All right.
So I had there was a general issue. We had only 4 books there. So and now today we will have 12 books there, and there's more books coming. Yeah. So if you need a book, then go for that. Be aware, this is not what I'm referring to here. The student handbook is a Word file that you can work through. So I have here the PDF open. This is literally a task setting. So be aware, the book is kind of the history of the theory that we're studying. Yeah, it's kind of talking where leadership theorems come from, why we actually organize, why do we talk about something strange like that. Yeah, and it's the book is very much about the background, the history, what empirically stands actually up against time and the organization versus what is idealized. Yeah. So, and the handbook is kind of the project context. So we look here at leadership, motivation. Here at the moment, still at culture, if you want. Yeah. Okay, so you will see they break it actually down into task design, group composition. So I've done the analysis for you. Go once through it and see if you actually see the dimensions. I have as well a paper summary and the actual contribution. So you may want to read it first and kind of try to do the exercise to see if you actually arrive at similar conclusions. Yeah, if you do, then it's very good. If not, come to me and challenge me. Yeah, I did this something like I think 5 years ago in this paper. Yeah, as an analysis. So maybe I have to reread it too and actually make sure that it's still up to date. So and again, there's a culture, workplace, organization context that we covered already. Yeah. Okay, so I've noticed. So it's still quite early, but this is something you want to cover. Yeah, and I'll make sure the dilemma of Apple. So make sure that you actually work through that to kind of anchor in kind of the topics that we have covered last session. This session I've actually kept it quite blunt with our lectures. So no advertisement this time. So on the uploaded version you will find it. So this kind of session we cover a little bit leftovers from chapter number 3. Now this is actually the root of our project management body of knowledge. You will have to challenge me on this one, yeah. But scientific management, as invented by Taylor, is actually a very strong root, of course, of project management. And I will argue even Max Weber, yeah, a light read about philosophy of people's life and motivation, is as well a strong root. And last but not least, we will cover exciting topics like should I advertise it that way? No, this is probably wrong. So we will have a look actually why we changed our management literature towards looking at project success maybe versus the traditional performance in a set time limit. Yeah. So in a nutshell, this will allow you to understand the historical context for the emergence of modern organization. Yeah, the modern organization is here still a business organization. This is not necessarily only specific to the project organization. And understands the importance of scientific management in changing how work is managed and conducted, and the underlying assumptions, which are dramatic, because we are still using them as a project manager. Yeah, so there's conceptual flaws with it that we kind of impose on our team members and on us as a project manager, maybe. And understand the role of bureaucracy in shaping work and modern organization. Why do we engage with something like that? Strange phenomena, write policies and rules for each other, and then saying you have to comply with it. That sounds slightly strange and exhausting, right? But still, we do this, and there's a good reason for it. And then appreciate the legacy of both. Oh, I shouldn't have done that with SM. Okay, scientific management. Yeah, so SM stands here for scientific management. Yeah, and bureaucracy for modern organization. Yeah, anyway. Okay, so the emergence of the modern organization was really kind of a phenomena around the Industrial Revolution, believe it or not. Yeah. So we are talking here. Well, what time frame do we talk? Industrial Revolution. Where would you place this roughly? Time-wise? Are we here somewhere? Columbus time, like discovering continents. Well, discovering is questionable. Yeah. Mid-century. Yeah, this is where it actually has its full blossom. When would you say it started? So you said here something like 1860, yeah, so 1850, yeah. When did it start, the Industrial Revolution, potentially?
Possibly the end of the 18th century. Yeah.
So it's accounted somewhere around 1760, 1780. This depends on your flavor of history book. Yeah, if they believe in the steam engine, then you are 1780. If you look at actually mass movement into suburban areas, and first of all, you have to recognize that you had to kind of take the land away from people so that they had to actually move. Yeah, so that was a politically interesting notion. That was the kind of shift from the agrarian to urban society. And that was actually a political scheme. Yeah? So it was literally set at the top level where they said like, hey, if we need a lot of people to produce something, we have to incentivize them to move actually away from the countryside. And this was in the UK. Yeah, so we play similar games still all around the world. So what we're covering now will give you a full spectrum of what's going on at the moment around the world as well. Yeah? And with this came a notion, so again, important to keep in mind, so we're looking here at time, space, and the mechanization of travel. Yeah, those were kind of the driving forces that informed us on our tools and how we perceived the role of management and team members maybe, or workers at the time, and actually moving to employees and employers and management, which was a new role. Yeah. Now, with this shift from agrarian to urban society, so this was a problem. Everybody lived dispersed, yeah, and was happily farming away. Well, happily is thrown there in, but you kind of needed to create an incentive that people would move away from their farms and actually come to central places of, for example, factories where you could kind of start doing some work coordinated in a bigger group. Yeah? And that was kind of the initial starting point of the Industrial Revolution. Yeah? Then you have the role of enclosure and immigration in creating working population. So it's as descriptive as it sounds. So this was really the idea of accumulating people, that you could actually do something greater than just maybe farming for yourself and market 52 weeks on the weekend. Yeah. And then there was as well the development of steam power, which kind of allowed kind of the fight of the muscle. Yeah. So this is the idea, like in the past, you would have people doing the physical labor, right, carrying stuff around. Now we could actually use the steam engine to move heavy loads rather than do it ourselves. Yeah, so and this referred as well to the replacement of horses as an engine, right? So it changed our units and our willingness and our time perception. Now this allowed efficient movement of goods. Yeah, so here we had rails. So keep in mind, yeah. So at this time, what was mind-blowing was if you wanted to travel anywhere, yeah, and you wanted to go to Italy, yeah, from, for example, UK or Germany, or I don't really mind, but you had the Alps in front of you, yeah, the mountains. Yeah, you would be like, oh my gosh, this is a horrendous travel. Look at those mountains. Yeah, so you would have a physical effect, even though you would probably sit on horses. Yeah, and with a train, with a steam train, you kind of curved basically holes into mountains, literally. You challenged nature. Yeah, and it was a huge mind shift actually. And so now you could actually challenge the world. That was a little bit the spirit. So, and it allowed as well a distribution of products and services far beyond the realms of neighboring localities, villages, valleys or whatever. So the local distribution was replaced with something geographically more outreaching. Yeah? Now, there was as well a shift in human experience of time and space. You could suddenly clock it. Yeah, believe it or not, but the Industrial Revolution was actually the inventor of the time clock. Yeah? We still have it here if you have a look. Yeah? So what is a time clock? Does anybody know? What's the idea? What do we use a time clock for? If you're not familiar, so the time clock is basically a thing where you,
When you clock in and out, is it from
yes,
when you walk in
yeah, you're spot on. Yeah, so it was probably it was a recognition that you would turn up for work, you would work for certain hours, you wouldn't finish the job, right? So think about it. This would be a terrible idea on your field. You rock up, your vegetables have grown, and you work 6 hours, and you're like, storm is coming, but 6 hours are over, I'm going home. Yeah, this wouldn't work. Yeah, you would miss out on these vegetables. Yeah, it's worse if you have other nature around and they try to eat your vegetables too, right? You wouldn't do this. You would finish the job. Yeah, so this was a new thing actually. So we had suddenly this actually. So the space is as well important. You would go to a place where you would clock in to be in a physical space to actually work for the time. Yeah, and this is already where management came in. Yeah, the management realized as well, shall we clock this on the second? Actually, this wasn't possible, because the clocks weren't that good. But they were like, you know what? We tell them if they are 1 minute late, we pay them only from 8:30. So if you rock up at 1 minute past 8 and you start working, they would say that you were late. We can only pay you from 8:30. Yeah, so they were already the first managerial levers. Yeah, this was politics. This was slight bullying. Yeah, yeah, you weren't there at 8 or you were not clocking in before. Yeah, so it was already kind of a notion of debate. Yeah, so you were late. And as well, if you were silly enough to clock out too early, yeah, so 1 minute to 5, then you wouldn't be paid for the full hour to 5. You would only be paid till 4:30. Yeah, and there were huge politics about it. If you had your own watch, now they existed around this time, yeah, people would actually throw you out of the company. They felt you were a revolutionizer. And it got worse. Yeah, so if you actually read the book, this is actually where scientific management came from. They realized it went out of hand. Managers and employees had like nearly battles, and you had like solidarity. So workers would walk very slowly to the time machine. Yeah, so there was all kind of issues going on. Yeah, so it created its own games. Yeah, this is important to realize. Yeah, that with managerial tools of too much control, and if it's one-sided, you are employing games, right? So even the workers or employees become very political, motivated to play the game in their favor, right? You don't want to lose out on half an hour pay, so you play it accordingly. Okay, so this is still, we are still kind of in the 70s, 80s, but those were innovations, right? Time and space. This is quite interesting. We still do this with projects, right? This is quite interesting, actually. Now, with this as well, we had the industrial worker actually emerging. Now, this phenomena didn't exist. So before, keep in mind, yeah, you owned probably your land, or you had common land where you could farm. So it was your farm, although it wasn't your land, yeah. So you worked kind of for yourself and would probably have an income from that. Now you were an employee. Now this was a new concept. So you were kind of employed by somebody to largely just do whatever they gave you. Yeah. So this shift to industrial society required new kind of worker. So the new worker habits marked by the shift from task time to clock time. So as I said, in farming you have a job, you finish the task, then you finish basically your day. And in the winter this can be very short. If you farm in the summer, it's probably a little bit longer. This is this is not always true with farming, but so as well with fishing, you name it, the traditional kind of trade. If you look at those, they still follow a task time setting rather than a clock time setting. Yeah? Now, and actually to explain that, task time was the organic sense of time shaped by tasks, and clock time is as a form of currency. So this was as well, you get paid actually by the hour, and workers pay for time they work. Now, as a worker, you realize as well, working very hard for 2 hours, yeah, and getting still the same pay, or working so la la for 2 hours, yeah, is a lot better. What is the so la la? And working very hard. Yeah, so there was a question of physicality or mental constraint that you would probably try to avoid and find a nice level, you know, where you don't basically fatigue yourself too much. With this shift to clock time made exploitation of labor possible. Now this was, again, keep in mind, so this theory came originally from Karl Marx, so, and the following Frankfurt School was as well probably people that saw it as such. So the idea was here that as a company owner, you would be actually keen on having management trying to optimize the labor time. Yeah? So we still do this. If you work in a team, you try that everybody works productive. And as a manager, you may look for short-term gains. So you're quite happy that somebody works physically very hard for a day. If he can't come on the next day, if you pay them daily, it's for the manager probably very little consequence. Now for the worker, this is a lot of consequence, right? He can't actually earn a living on the next day. So there were certain dynamics, and that actually created political unrest. Yeah? Clock time became as well a significant focus of struggle between industrialists and workers. So we had actually the first worker movements already around 1830. It became actually quite violent. So I'm saying 1830, this is still violent. Yeah? So if you look at the news, mining in particular, arguably very nice companies, Anglo-America, very big mining company in America, very popular. Mining strikes in South Africa, still a lot of dead people being shot. If you read at the history of these struggles, still down to timing, pay agreements, routers, it's still the same arguments. Yeah? So this still exists. Be aware, in your project environment you may face similar dynamics. Be aware that those control mechanisms create certain responses of workers. They have to protect themselves as well, right? So with time as currency, employers attempted to extract as much labor from workers as possible during time of purchase. So you get kind of the logic, I hope. Yeah. Now then, Taylor came actually got along kind of in the 1860s, and he said like, whoa, we are going towards war, this is crazy, we cannot keep this industrial worker notion going. We have to understand principles by which we can protect the worker and at the same time the industrialist. And that is kind of where Taylor's system idea came from. So he said, I have one system that will fit all, well, at least this is his claim initially. So he kind of tried a systematic effort to develop principles regarding management of workers. And this was really an attempt to apply scientific principles to work under industrial capitalism, as you want. So this is like company ownership while still employing other people, right? So, and here the principles applied to workers who are expropriated. So this is workers who only have their labor power to sell. So he was again very precise about this. Now, Taylor's principle, as I said, was kind of aiming at developing one best way that fits all. And it was actually very quickly disregarded. But let's have a look first of what they are. Taylor dealing with work situations with high antagonism between owners and workers. So there was political revolt. There were teams not willing to do the work actually. And a lot of the teams actually organized themselves. So even though they had in the past trades and crafts, now they were working teams. We still have that nowadays. Yeah, we have the welders, or we have maybe the operations team on the line. Yeah, so this is not too far off actually. We have kept it to a large extent. And Taylor attempted here to address the problem of systematic soldiering among workers, which is kind of a solidarity. You recognize that some of your workers are faster and others are not so fast. So the kind of agreed code is you don't work so fast that some people lose their work because they can't actually hold up to it, right? So this was kind of a very quick realization. Now, this was kind of a deliberate effort to reduce output, keep employers ignorant of how fast work can be done, and we still have this in today's project, right? So this was an outcry of the Crossrail guys. The subcontractors and tier 1 and tier 2 suppliers, they are not telling us how fast they can really do it. And of course they have a commercial interest, right? You're being held accountable against like optimal performance rate versus the delivery rates that are contractually agreed, so of course they don't give that away. Yeah? So this is their own protection, if you want. Yeah? And then conducted by groups, not individual workers. So this is another important element. So this became actually quite a concern as well to kind of think about task definition rather than role definitions. Yeah? So this is quite an interesting one. Now, Taylor overcome the system of ordinary management, which was based on rule of thumb decision making. So this was basically management kind of trying to optimize the workers' efforts. So, and he came kind of up with a few principles. And the irony is that kind of in the 1880, this was already dismissed as not good, but it has absolutely sunk in as an underlining logic into all our management literature. So you will see the principles everywhere. Yeah, and still we have the same precursors with the control mechanisms that they had already in the past. So scientific job design, each task is carefully analyzed and redesigned according to scientific principles. We still do this with work breakdown structures. We have the tools, of course. Yeah. Then scientific selection and training of workers. Be careful, this is not an educational or training setting for an individual. becoming fully aware and understanding something. This is really training on the job so they can perform what they have at work. Yeah? So management matches each workers to the job for which they are best suited. Now, is this different? Are we still doing this? Kind of, right? We have a hybrid at the moment. We kind of ask you to apply or need to apply somewhere for a job, so we kind of pick our work, but then we get still given kind of the real role, right? Or we are being selected by a team. So this was a shift actually, so that workers were matched with the job was different. In the past, they were actually kind of applying towards a group that they wanted to work in. Yeah, and this is still true if you look actually back 40 years here, you will see that sons would actually go in the work of the father and daughters would kind of follow the jobs or work of the mother. Yeah, so there's still a conflicting hybrid in the world, and there were good reasons why one was abandoned in that setting, but there were as well other good reasons to keep it actually that way. Now the third one was the cooperation between management and workers. So ensure work corresponds to the scientific management principles. Now this was a breakthrough. So this is a little bit like our project management. We have a framework where we measure agreed outputs of our performance against the team. It's visible for both, right? It's visible for the team. It's as well visible for us as a project manager maybe. So it's kind of an honest shot. We can see what is legitimate, what not. And that was actually quite an advancement. So this is basically the same. So they use the scientific management principles as a benchmark of legitimization. So you had as well workers that would actually challenge, for example, behavior from management to the employer, and it was multiple accountability in that sense. But again, it didn't work that well. Yeah? Managers provide as well a supportive work environment, so there was as well an incentivization for managers to actually care about the workers, which wasn't to the extent before there. Yeah? And then you had an equal division of work between management and workers. Management has actually the responsibility for designing tasks. Workers execute them according to scientific design. And here, this goes very closely to the planning literature, but you will see this in 1 week's time. We actually have a look at how organizations were planned, and then you will see that there's a strong correlation of what we still do today if you have actually a planning office in your project team. Yeah. And then this was really a moral crusade for Taylor. So it was a great mental revolution necessary for a success of the system. But at the same time, he tried to kind of actually challenge the time of revolt that actually came up. Yeah. And scientific management eliminates immoral waste motion in work and replaces unrest with social harmony. Yeah, and this was literally what it was aimed at creating harmony. So it tried to avoid, if you want, conflict, and kind of situations where you would have unrest. Yeah? And here the idea, if you want, or the logic that underlies it was that science can bring rationality, and the workers too, and management would now have a rational reference point. This would allow more efficiency, which is a moral virtue because you wouldn't have conflict anymore, and by that you would have harmony. So this was social harmony. Yeah, that was kind of his idea, and it was actually rolled out. He was a very successful consultant with this, and particularly in America, this really took off. In the UK, only partially. We had different movements here, but it was quite an important one. Now, this was actually followed by Frank and Lillian Gilbreth. Actually, I think Lillian has a second family name because I've read never mind. So you may find other work from her as well under a different name. So she kind of, they both actually built on scientific management and criticized it. And there were a few good reasons why they criticized it. Scientific management kind of saw the worker or employee as a manual worker, as somebody that brings the body to the work but hasn't got the brain, right? It's in the task design. You basically write a guide So basically you incentivize people as well to turn up that way, so to leave the brain at home. Now they kind of recognized that that was a terrible idea, and they had a few notions here. So they became really famous for notions like cheaper by the dozen. This was actually referring to their children. So they realized that having 12 children is a brilliant idea, but they tried to apply the scientific management principles to their family, and they realized telling the children how much work they can do and not engaging with their mental development was a risky strategy. It created chaos, basically. So they very quickly realized that it is really cheaper to bring up 12 children at the time, but you still have to do something else. So initially advocates of Taylor's system, but later rejected his focus on time. So they noticed that development or work trimmed to time is maybe a bad idea if you are after a certain outcome or benefit overall, right? And use of film to study worker motion. So they kind of tried to economically redesign workplaces. Yeah, so they analyzed what you use a lot, what you don't use a lot, and then redistributed the spatial design, right? So it's kind of a really good idea if you think about it. Yeah, so you can do it too in your workplace. You use one book more, and you consistently lean over. If you want to now remove your strain on your body, then you probably move that book closer and move one that you don't use that often, maybe further away, right? So very simple analogy. But this was a big thing for them. So they kind of started getting very involved as consultants in factory design and even sweatshops. And so keep in mind, at that time we were still doing a lot of things physically by hand.
What sort of time period are we looking at?
Here we, with them, we are kind of 1890 already. So they really kind of were scholars of Taylor. This is not at the same time. They had an overlap. Yeah, and particular Frank kind of passed away around like 1924, but Lillian grew old to 98. So if you are a consultant, yeah, and you respect kind of social psychology and a happy environment, that seems to be beneficial to living longer. No, it's an unjustified claim, but I thought I threw it out anyway. Yeah, so she grew very old, Lillian. Yeah, maybe it's the 12 children as well that keep you alive, but something like that. And the use of film, yeah, is nothing like what we have now, right? This was slow motion. Have you seen Charlie Chaplin? The what is the famous movie called? The Factory or the? That's a really good. If you want to go back in time, he has a lot of beautiful movies towards that. Now she wrote actually then the Blick as basic unit of work motion. And okay. So the idea was here siblings, yeah, and the notion was a comparative of motion that is healthy to your body. So that was actually still the initial work. Now the effort to reduce fatigue among workers. So this was still the spatial design and attention to psychological dimensions of work. So as well as stress and having no access to other people. This looked like a very good idea because you wouldn't be interrupted, but it was actually a very terrible idea. Yeah, people would fatigue and potentially show sign of serious disturbance. Yeah. They had this work, so here we go kind of on the work that I indicated already. They did something looking at happiness minutes. So this was argued for a need to increase job satisfaction by matching workers with jobs and keeping the jobs interesting. So keep in mind, this is 1920 when they kind of did this, right? And I'm not sure that in all workplaces this has ever arrived or that we're actually managing for something like that. Research predates human relations studies as well, so it was kind of mind-boggling what Lillian's application actually brought out. Lillian was a little bit unlucky. Frank had a heart attack, died away in 1924, I think. And then Lillian, as I said, grew still to nearly 100. Yeah, so she did basically 3/4 of her life without him. And at that time, Lillian, as a female consultant, picked the wrong country. Yeah, India. Actually, I should be careful here which countries I'm picking. But there were some countries that embraced females as consultants. US and Great Britain didn't. So she was in the wrong countries. So she actually reinvented her kind of principles of redesigning the private space. So she pleaded to families the one best way to the home. And that was kind of an analysis of how you work at home. And at that time, it was beautiful things like the washing machine that really changed lives of, if you were a woman or a family member that stayed at home and looked after the household, washing the clothes was a terrible task. That was quite exhausting. So things like this grabbed hand in hand and became quite an interesting combination. Now, and she lived happily after for many more years and became actually a success with that. Yeah, so after a very tough time in between, was kind of companies stepping away from her. Now there are 5 criticisms of scientific management. So one of the most important one is separation of conception of work from its execution. Yeah, so particular if you work in different project environments, you will see in some industry sectors we wouldn't dare to do so. In other industries, it's a need to do. So if you look at construction, we still have, how do you put that nicely? There's still a lack of will to kind of invest into vocational skills in construction. As a consequence, if you are an owner of a construction site or you're building your own house, it would be insane to just leave it basically to people that are trained on site to kind of get on with the job. There are like too many tasks that are actually quite difficult. Having said that, building a space rocket, still you work here with design, but basically disagreeing with the rocket engineers, not a smart move if you want to have the building afterwards. Yeah? So, but here the idea was place all knowledge with managers, workers simply executed a task, yeah? And this is still a very strong thing that carries as well in project management. If you look at work organization, how we allocate tasks and time, there's still an intent there. Yeah? So be careful with that. It has its role in certain places. Yeah? So if they really don't know what to do, of course, then you have to kind of investigate training and create an environment where they can actually perform it. But if you're working with knowledge workers, if you're recruiting basically for degree courses, yeah, where they have experience 5 or 6 years, and you're still designing then the task for them, then something went wrong. All I'm saying, yeah. Now, head and brain not just divided, but hostile to each other. So workers alienated from labor process. This was really the notion that managers would create as well rules that would kind of bring them in a new context where they wouldn't know what to do, and de-skilling of work under scientific management. So this was a recognition. Before we had traditional crafts and trades that had been kind of grown over thousands of years. If you go back and read any kind of Greek text, you will see that they have already a carpenter, they have already, so those are kind of trade traditions. And they were kind of breaking with this to actually have a more functional organization. Yeah. Again, another criticism: human body as a vocal point of control efforts. Yeah, so, time, spatial notions. Then individual workers as a unit of analysis, yeah, neglect of social dimension of work, and Taylor viewed group communication as a dysfunctional, interfered with the one best way. So he did wonderful things like putting people in remote places. Yeah, so they had a machine on the left side and a machine on the right side. So no chance of destruction and talking to anybody. Yeah, and of course there was as well a view of workers as exclusively motivated by money. So this was paternalistic view of the workers and ignoring the psychological needs of the workers. And there are a few more. So as well, the problem was the idea of society as a functioning according to the one best way. So he wanted as well a morale system that would actually cure society's ills. So he didn't like conflict a lot, as carries kind of through. And Taylor operated with a limited conception of communication. So communication was for him really just handing on your kind of preset task to somebody else. That was enough. So the alignment to a mechanical process. And this made a lot of sense, right? You had now assembly lines that were actually moving, where people just had to lever maybe with a screwdriver or something, then that was basically what it was. And then managers transmit information downward to employees, so it's a one-direction communication. Now the legacy of Taylor's kind of efforts was quite surprising. So counter to the empirical studies that showed that it's partly a crazy concept, it was widely accepted. So people really embraced the efficiency drive and trying to operationalize it. It's nowadays still taken for granted way of organizing work. Other theories built on scientific management still exist. One example is fast food industry is still based on scientific management principles, and it's not just them. So as well, if you look at lean organizations, they kind of do that. You have as well the customer service industry, so interaction between clerks and customer are highly regulated. So there's a few really nice case studies in the book if you get it out and have a look. This is kind of part chapter 3 and chapter 4, right? Role of scientific management in personal life is still there, and the most famous one is self-help books, right? And the self-help book is still one of the oxymorons, right? If there's one way that helps all, why are there so many self-help books? There's probably a questionable concept in the first place behind it. But again, yeah, so this was kind of the idea of doing this. Shall we jump into Max Weber? Where are we? Oh, that's what? Okay, this is clearly not working. Okay, we are good in time. Yeah, okay, so let's do a 10 minutes break just for my good, that I can refill my cups of water. Any questions so far? Okay, Max Weber is as well a little bit more history, but then we are back in the news, yeah? Okay, shall we do 10 minutes? Yeah, 10 minutes, okay. Again? So just after a little bit kind of ideas where the scientific management literature came from, we want to probably go a step further and have a look again in the kind of critical theory. He is certainly celebrated as one of the heroes, and the name has kind of moved into the text. But anyway, it's Max Weber, and he was a little bit. How can you describe him? He was quite a cynical character. Actually, if you read it, he kind of. This is a fascinating movement we have in the finance and banking. We have at the moment a rediscovery of kind of religion, yeah, and you can see this. There's Islamic banks and there's this way Christian banks, which Weber believed as well. So he actually analyzed kind of concepts of Protestant banking and capitalism. So that was quite interesting. But the point is, if you talk to any bankers, they will tell you very quickly that there's very little influence of religion in those things, but never mind, this is a different topic. So Weber was a sociologist and philosopher, largely philosopher really, interested in examining the political, legal and religious and economic systems of different societies. He wanted to describe what makes people tick at the time. Yeah, and he was interested in forms of power that had emerged in different societies. So one thing that blew his mind, and keep in mind we are here kind of 1880 to 1940, was that kings or whole monarchies were suddenly replaced by a system called economists. Yeah, so you had suddenly business owners that were more powerful and more interesting to people than the king before, which was crazy, right? That there was a good history of thousands or 2,000 years of feudal systems that had kind of survived. But here were new forms of power that had actually emerged in different societies, and they were dominant. They kind of took from the kings and queens, in some drastic cases, the head off, quite frankly. Yeah? And adopted a broader view of society than Marx. So Marx was kind of materialistic. He rejected that, but they never admitted that they read each other's stuff. So this is very bad scientists. Yeah? You should normally quote the work that you're reading. But anyway, rejected this narrow view on the economic system. although again, he hadn't. Weber was kind of recognizing that there is an economic system, but the society kind of carries what the economic system is. So, and with this religious views and political views, of course. Now, Weber types of authority that he recognized was a charismatic authority, and this comes from Latin really, charismatic, kind of saying gift of grace, and this was more recognition of the old societies. So you noticed while he was particularly surrounded by kind of clerical and religious leaders, and there you couldn't prevail really with financial power, but you often did so because you had a particular connection to people. Yeah, so this was the so-called gift of grace, and he recognized this is not just a phenomena in terms of leadership, in terms of monotheistic or polytheistic institutions like Catholic Church or I don't know what, yeah. But this is a phenomena as well in kind of groupings in general. Yeah. So here he had the identification of individual as possessing exceptional qualities that can move people, and this was based on different elements. So he said as well, like, wow, look at the workers' movement. There were as well these charismatic, authoritative leaders. Where was that coming from? Yeah. So so he noticed that authority is based in followers' belief in validity and truth of their powers. Yeah, so it didn't just resign with a king or queen, this is probably the most common one, or an emperor or emperorate. Actually, I'm not sure if that is a female format, but anyway. But the point is, you have these roles. But the kind of idea was that the validity from authority comes actually from the follower's belief. Yeah, this is important. So you may too have, if you have a team, you motivate them, you come in as a project manager with a certain expertise, and they probably believe that you can help them. This is normally why you're employed in the first place, right? So there is an element of that that is given to you by default, right? So then you have charismatic authority can be possessed by religious leaders, politicians, and corporate leaders. Sorry, I did it the other way around. Yeah, but anyway, here you get the idea. Now, the charismatic authority emerges in times of crisis, so tends to be characterized by instability and chaos because charisma is located in an individual and potential for disruption is high. Yeah, so if you reverse this logic, we see this a lot in small to medium-sized enterprises. You often have a company owner or manager that kind of drives it with his whole passion and kind of involvement. And if you replace this person, then you have often a very different organization. It's very difficult to kind of carry it on. Now, the idea is as well that if a leader that is very charismatic gets replaced against like somebody else just because that person is next in line, and doesn't have the same belief from the followers, then you're in a lot of trouble. Yeah? And you can actually see that is the biggest dilemma of feudal societies. You can see that kings spend a lot of money and effort in reintroducing their offspring, their oldest offspring, to the new society. They would make sure that everybody has seen his face before, that they recognize him as charismatic too, and so forth. Yeah? So there's actually a lot of marketing and lobbying that went into that. Yeah? Now, traditional authority is inherited right of an individual to accept obedience and loyalty from others. Now, this is not actually always true. Yeah? This is the idea. Its legitimate exercise of authority comes from adherence to tradition and age-old customs and values. So there was as well a kind of birth giving to the new king, and if you're interested in that stuff, there are weird ceremonies around it, but it still sticks true. Yeah, we still have these handovers of leadership that are ceremonial, and actually, so do we at university. When you actually will graduate from this MSc, you will see, we will actually celebrate you by putting you on a podium and dressing you up in an amazing gown. Yeah, and you will see, we will stay at the bottom and adore you for the achievement. Yeah? So this is still true. Yeah? So we still have those traditions. Yeah? And yeah. So examples here is inherited authority of monarchs, nepotism in family businesses. Yeah? So this still exists. I think in the book they pick on Murdoch, so But this is the most recent example is really Trump, right? So this is elite. If you don't know what I'm talking about, it's probably good that way. But the idea is that you, instead of promoting the next most capable, charismatic individual, you say like, hey, why not my daughter or my son? Yeah, and they have just come out of a coffee shop and they're like, what? Okay, it's me? Yeah, so anyway, but this, I'm not sure that it's always a surprise, so there's a certain intentionality. And then you have certain lines again of authority carried over. Old boys networks is another one, and old school tie. Yeah, so again, be aware, this is still a very common phenomena. Old boys network has a, what's the problematic with this? Why is this presented that way?
Just like the British government.
Oh, I see. So you even see. So there's a suspicion that even current organizations, like maybe even parties of the British government, are run that way. So, but what's so dramatic about it? Why would we be upset? Why would I, as a single traveler, fully capable, having trained all the time, be upset about something like that? Not having been to those schools and not in those networks. Why would that be upsetting for me?
Because we have an inner circle.
If you bar other people from getting into the caucus, that's not good.
Yeah, so they're in a circle, and it prevents people from
stop other people's, from getting to that caucus.
Yes.
It's really bad.
Yeah, you're spot on. This is a bad thing, right? So I have now trained the whole time, and I'm like, yeah, this is a job I want to apply for. I apply, and it's not even considered. Yeah. And I look at the CV from them. Where is actually the CV? Oh, they didn't need a CV. They just come in. It's like, what? So outrage, right? So again, this and by the way, this wasn't just me saying it was an outrage. This was a point of general conflict. There were rebellions on that at the time. Yeah. So if that came out that there was such a thing, sometimes it was celebrated openly. In Germany, in Bavaria, if you travel ever to the what is it, Swan? Schloss Schwanstein. Anybody English names? Okay, so there's a strange Bavarian castle. Everybody travels there to make pictures. It looks like a fairy tale castle. Now ask them what happened to the king. He had this thing of going with old boys networks and nepotism. Yeah, this is not even like the king. So you're kind of first line in here, but he embraced it as well for his ministers and things like that. It didn't go down very well. The government basically killed him. Police basically shot him. Yeah. So they shot him with arrows and then headed him. Yeah, just to be sure. Yeah. So this was not taken well. In Bavaria, you don't want to apply those mechanisms. All I'm saying. Yeah. So they really don't like that. So anyway, but the point is, it was rebellion, and another one was actually we are here already with the main theorem. So Max Weber then realized that there is a rational legal authority, which is different from kind of the traditional authority, which is the rule of the bureau. So arguably the most gifted and neutral people have been voted into the system purely by capability. Oh, wait a minute, I have written this down as well. This comes later, but based on competence or actual ability, those bureau people are picked and they make the rules for us. And the best thing is the bureau treats everybody the same. It's not necessarily the same good, but everybody is treated the same, no matter where you're from. So that was why Max Weber was like, this is the most impressive authority. Now, it's a set of rational and impersonal rules, so it doesn't relate to your upbringing or which network you belong to, which guides people's behavior and decision making. Yeah? So authority rests on a set of legally sanctioned rules and regulations, and Weber's features of bureaucracy. What was I thinking there? Now, the whole idea, I think, at the time was that they actually recognized that the bureaus were generally capable bodies. So people were promoted based on on their achievements, on what they actually did, which was already a capability recognition, and it was generally unquestioned. So many people, once they understood the logic, bought actually into it, which was quite surprising. Yeah. Oh, here, sorry. So Weber's features of bureaucracy: chain of command with appropriately assigned responsibilities, system of impersonal rules governing office holders. So by the way, this meant as well that a role allocated would fit everybody in this organization. So you wouldn't have ambiguous roles that would be too hard working. Those would be actually relatively well-balanced roles, yeah? And impersonal. So, and written regulation describing rights and duties of members. So this was actually a very powerful construct, but very impersonal. Clearly defining division of labor with specialization of task. This was as well security, so you couldn't be moved from that. That was actually kind of you granted. Norms of impersonality that govern relations between people in the bureaucracy, and employees make decisions based on rules of their position, not personal ties to others. Yeah, so this was another element. So you kind of undercut power-seeking behavior. Well, there's still one, but it's linear. Written documentation, use of a file system that stores information upon which decision-making is carried out. Now, this is still something that we actually probably cherish as very good practice. Yeah? If you kind of provide transparent information on which you make the decision, you will see most people will probably accept it. They may not accept the information that you have used, right? So they may say like, hey, you have ignored this information. But yeah, if you do it transparent, this is probably still one of the strongest kind of agreed formats. Yeah. Now for Weber, bureaucracy and rational legal authority is superior because it's more democratic. So even the most, the largest enemies, probably finance systems and things like that, had very little ground for argument against it. Even treated according to merit, so that there's even a notion of positive benefiting basically the users, and enhances capitalist enterprise, so improves efficiency of business and kind of de-incentivizes bribery, yeah, or again, kind of ties or nepotism or anything of that kind, yeah. Now, there was, of course, as well bureaucracy rationalization that he critiqued, and this came as well from Weber. Weber was quite afraid that it leads to narrowing of human vision and limited appreciation of other models of existence. Yeah, so if you have one system that everybody buys in, yeah, so if you all use Google for all your ideas and your dreams, you're like, I want to be, and then you have a look what Google writes for you, yeah, and everybody does this, then it's very likely that we all have very similar dreams, right? So it's still useful to kind of cherish our individuality. And that was kind of his greatest fear. He was afraid that as a society, and as well as companies, we would all fall in that rationale. Now this is not really new to us, right? Marx kind of was already afraid of that, and the Frankfurt School had similar worries, right? They kind of wrote of the corporate colonization, right? So that there was a very similar idea. Now he calls that the iron cage of bureaucracy. So once you buy in the logic, it's very difficult to think actually outside of that kind of logical framework. There's a lack of enchantment. Oh, well, what is enchantment? I don't even pronounce it properly anymore, but that is largely down to my nose. Does anybody know? Enchantment? Yeah? What is a lack of enchantment? I take guesses at this point. Yeah, I like the thinking. Yeah, it goes in that. Yeah, so you're going in the right way. Yeah, so magic. Yeah, or more practical.
Enthusiasm, charm.
Yeah, exactly. There are few surprises, or you know, kind of personalized. The old translation is mesmerism. Yeah, that you kind of get fascinated. Yeah, if you're an enchanter. Yeah, this depends if you think of the noun or the predicate. But the point here is that it loses kind of out on the human aspect, right? You become too bureaucratic. Yeah, if anybody that goes, any famous departments that kind of embrace the bureaucracy to its fullest? Any recent experiences?
Job center?
A job center can be one, yeah. So filling out the forms, yeah. Yeah. It's as well if you have a driving license or something. There's a lot of fun associated with it. So this is kind of the direction that he was anticipating. And this is interesting, right? He wrote this in the 1880s. Yeah, we didn't have bureaucracies yet. That's quite fascinating that he actually was able to predict what we would enjoy now, right? So this is a good wide shot, yeah, 120 years down the road. Yeah. So examples of rationalization was corporate use of emotions for profit. Oh, well, what is this? Corporate emotions for profit? What is that? Are you aware of an environment where we actually kind of tailor or design emotions in so that people are happy to spend more money? Consume a little bit more? Would you do that as a project manager? It sounds unethical, right? Oh, not that unethical. What do you think? Emotions. We have just rationalized everything and finally have nice paperwork, and then as a task we design in emotions. Okay, I'll give you one example. If you go to the restaurant, do you want a bureaucratic organization, or do you prefer somebody that says, hello, can I bring you to your table? I would like to see the restaurant with a form. Please fill in there. Oh, just a receipt from I'm pretty sure that will exist somewhere. But the point is, it made actually sense in the bureaucratic organization to have the interface, again, having emotions. Yeah? Whereas we have rationalized, it's actually rational to design emotion in, which is kind of contradicting. If you're interested in this, it's a brilliant case study on this in the book chapter. Yeah? Education as a means to an end and not in an end in itself. What could that be? In a bureaucracy rationalized, why do we get educated? If everything is like forms filling, why would we seek something like education, understanding of the world, or knowledge? Actually, this is maybe a very philosophical question. Yeah? So here, in that sense, education was just to fill in a form, to do a role, right? So you would be trained to do a job. You wouldn't be, so our education principles, at least in the UK, are still leaning towards Humboldt and another, well, I shouldn't really go too much farther with it, but it's the idea of making you a participating citizen. Yeah? So you are free to do what you want. This is kind of what we kind of write education for. But again, there's a cynical line, and some of you may buy already in for that. Maybe education is just to get the next job, right? And then the education is, of course, kind of, you get it and you go in the job, right? And then education is ended. Now, this was kind of a consequence of our rationalized organization. So you wouldn't just learn something for the sake of being interested and passionate in it, to find out and understand the world and the universe and all that. Yeah. Instead, you would just do it to actually walk into a job, basically. Yeah. Okay. I have to probably jump that. So we come now actually to the leadership theorem. But what I would like to do is, so this is as well in your student handbook. Now have a look which ones actually resonate with you. We are starting now to go very fast from history to the current. So we start actually off by leaderships. So now we can actually do that. It doesn't take too long. So here are some famous quotes from what people perceived as leadership. And you can see we had authority already as a driving force. We had kind of a bureaucratic system, and we had kind of this inheritance of authority, right? So those are just some formats. You will see there are many more that we come to now. So do we actually see those? So some, the charisma, arguably, yeah, if Weber is right, resists in some people. Yeah? So how do we know if we are one such person? you can do the test, yeah, on a festival, or you need a lot of people first, right? This is kind of the problem. Otherwise, the test is ambiguous. You have to run in front of them and kind of try to take them over with your charisma, right? This is actually quite a heavy experiment, yeah. But arguably, there's something about it, yeah. Then we had the kind of inherited authority, right? This is by tradition. So we still have that, right? If you do any sports, one of my examples as well is about rowing. So if you have rowed a very long time, then they often make you the team captain. This has more to do with years served rather than being the best. Then we had the last version. That was kind of the bureaucracy, the bureau. So the organization that writes the rules by a transparent framework, right? And decision making by providing the information and background. Yeah. Okay, let's have a look. So what is leadership? Elusive qualities. Some leadership definitions from famous people. So we have a leader is a dealer in hope. Apparently Napoleon Bonaparte. With those references, I'm not always sure, but they come from the book. Yeah? So I wouldn't Google too much. This may be accounted to other people. A leader is best when people barely know that he exists. Not so good when people obey and acclaim him. Worst when they despise them. Him, not them. Yeah? Fail to honor people, they fail to honor you. But of a good leader who talks little when his work is done, his aim fulfilled, they will all say, we did this ourselves. So this is the best leader. This is actually, this is Tao, if you want, Lao Tzu. So very different from, what does he praise here? What's the difference?
One's empowering people to perform.
Yeah.
And the other one is kind of as empowering, as encouraging them.
Yeah. So here is kind of visionary, right? But still a leader, very visible as well up front. Here the leader is invisible, right? So this is at least this claim of success. So if people feel they have done it, then you're a successful leader. Yeah? This is particularly bad if you're in a company where you get bonuses and rewards. Yeah? If you as a leader say like, oh, my team did it, there were rewards. Tough luck, my friend. Yeah? So I'm joking about this, but the point is that there are certain systems that kind of honor that. Yeah. A leader shapes and shares a vision which gives point to the work of others. Yeah. So again, similar lines. Then a leader takes people where they want to go. A great leader takes people where they don't necessarily want to go, but ought to be. So again, Rosalind Carter. Yeah. As we look ahead into the next century, leaders will be those who empower others. So, be willing to make decisions. That's the most important quality in a good leader. Leadership and learning are indispensable to each other. So it's quite interesting. And then a little bit different spin to it. Leadership is a combination of strategy and character. If you must be without one, be without a strategy. So this comes from the military, I should add. Yeah. People ask difference between a leader and a boss. The leader works in the open and the boss in covert. The leader leads and the boss drives. You manage things, you lead people, so this goes already in the idea of dividing management versus leadership. And then other ones, leadership, the art of getting someone else to do something you want done because he wants to do it. And this is nearly entrepreneur, right? So this is getting others to do what you want to achieve. Yeah. But second one, leadership, the capacity and will to rally people to a common purpose together with a character that inspires confidence and trust. And then management is efficiency in climbing the ladder of success. Leadership determines whether the ladder is leaning against the right wall. And actually, Stephen R. Covey is one of these chaps that Weber would have probably criticized most, because he's a self-help guru too. Yeah. So again, kind of promoting the one, well, the principles that fit everybody. So which one did you feel resonated most from you, from a theme? Is there one that you would say like, yeah, I can see this is kind of today's leadership, or I've worked in organizations where I can see this works?
I think the mind work in different, like in different aspects. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It depends on where. Because in some places they need a very hard leaders, to like come on guys, and some places.
So you would go here back to the former one, right? So
it depends on the organization and the goals that
wait a minute, where is my hurdling everybody together? Oh no, sorry, that was the last one, right? Yeah, this is kind of this one, yeah, really people to come in purpose, yeah. So you see that sometimes it's required, right, to get things done?
Yeah, it depends on where it's needed. Does that make sense? Like in military, you need to know who is in charge. You need to know who's taking the lead. Does that make sense?
Yeah, good, but then you don't have to rally people together. Then you're actually, where are our military? The military
So
was
it
actually
serves-
before, right? So it's quite
serves
structured.
Yeah, it serves different purposes.
Mm.
Where, in some organization, everything is like, equal. Like, depends on the hierarchy and everything, how the organization wants it.
Mm.
It has to, in some places, it has to suit the employee as well. In some organization, you wouldn't know the leader.
Yeah, so you're spot on. And in a way, we want to look at those quotes and to identify maybe what organizations we are familiar with, right? So to see the place of different leadership styles, and are they still following kind of the old theorems that we're covering, or are they subscribing to the new ones that we will cover in the next chapters? Yeah? So, but you are saying, so this resonated with you. You can see this being relevant. Yeah. Well, what organization were you thinking there of, or is this like something you have experienced, or?
It's something that I've experienced in different, when I say leadership, I've experienced it in a different way.
Mm.
It's not the same everywhere you go.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Work, everywhere you go, leadership is different.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless of the new and old.
Yeah, but so where did you feel that you have to kind of bring people together, and push on as a leader? Is this always the case, or which organizations did you have in mind there?
It depends on the goals that you are aiming for. Does that make sense? It depends on the goals that you are aiming for. Like I said, I've experienced leadership in different ways, even till now.
Mm.
There's no old, there's no new. Do you know what I mean? I've experienced the older ones, I've experienced the new ones, I've experienced whereby authoritative leadership, whereby the leadership has to be pushing before things can be done. Does that make sense? It depends on the goals, like I said. You know what I mean?
Mm.
That you guys are aiming for.
Yeah, but so what organizations have you seen something like that before? I suppose one where I've seen the rallying people together is, this is probably a very bad example, but I used to travel with my rowing teams around the country for competitions, and after the race, the right thing to do would be to train down. Yeah? So you would kind of try to relax your muscles, and ironically do things like go running and stretching and do some yoga. But on the day after the races, normally everybody would really like to lie in and sleep and have a long breakfast. So this is literally when this leadership came in. I remember that our coach came in, come on, you know the program, the drill, but nobody wanted to do it. Everybody, oh, come on, we raced yesterday. We were fine, yeah, but this was literally when it was time for something like that. You had to kind of, one person had to be pulled out of the bed. And at the time it felt terrible. But after the stretching and the running, everybody felt so much better, yeah. So although nobody wanted it, it's a questionable example, yeah, but at the end, this leadership style did do us actually very well. Yeah, so everybody had not so sore legs when we actually traveled back home, yeah. But this is one example, yeah, if you want. But otherwise, did you see some of the leadership styles in organizations that you have experienced, or? I mean, they all have their place, right? So those are all kind of arguably recognized authorities or captains of the industry. Yeah, so at least to the book, according to the book. So the one that intrigues me the most, has anybody experienced this, where it was completely about the team? Where the whole team was like, yeah, we did it. Have you been part of an organization like this, or experienced something like that?
I feel like the only work if the team have been together for so long, like they've experienced so many things and they're used to each other. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's hard to work when everybody is new to the team.
Mm-hmm.
Does it make sense? It would be good if the teams that have their upside down and and they get used to each other and they know how to tackle conflicts and everything is equal. It could work. It depends, to be honest. But
That works quite well when you're working with a youth group that you want to encourage to lead themselves.
Yeah. So youth groups. Yeah. What is your example?
If you take, for example, a group of scouts or a
Mhm.
group of teenagers on a sort of like an outbound or some sort of course, that you'd want them to work for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So you tend to try and be as invisible as possible, but just gently.
That everybody made it there, yeah, and then gives them a very entertaining task that they can achieve, yeah. Yeah, okay, yeah, very good example. So maybe scouts, yeah, trying to facilitate that they kind of do it for themselves, yeah. Actually, scouts is a good example. I was as well, and I was thinking my grandparents lived in Switzerland, so we were as well sent out to do hiking on the mountain and build an igloo, which at the time sounded very romantic. I didn't. Anyway, so we felt like we had a great achievement and actually slept in it, which is probably not so amazing anymore. But the point is, we really felt like, yeah, our achievement. But in reality, it was tough. Yeah. Okay, well, maybe you reflect a little bit on this. This is so all of those leadership styles kind of have their place, right? Arguably, they are recognized as good examples of what we should consider we're striving towards. And there are just a few. You will see in the book even more. I've just kind of taken out the first ones that were all recognized as famous, charismatic people. I'm not sure that I could sign up with all of them, but again, so they're clearly there. Yeah. We run out of time and we haven't even touched on the second part. Okay, the second part is really about the empiry of those studies, and this is kind of where it gets a little bit tricky, and which makes it very important for us to kind of have a closer look at this. So, historical and political context of a lot of our organization theories had a huge ideologic underpinning, and actually our project management literature is still full of practice-oriented solutions that work for some project managers, but are very unlikely to be repeatable in such an environment. So the next chapter looks really at kind of a few elements of leadership that led actually to an emphasis on what is now a discipline in its own right, human resource management, but at the same time kind of tools that we are actually employing quite strongly. So building a team, kind of motivation theorems, this came out of organizational studies. So here the social and political trauma of the early 20s again. So we're talking here 1910 to 1930. This was kind of the environment where there were a few good reasons for it. There was a bank crash. There was actually a social unrest because we had peaks of wealth for a few people and increasing poverty for most. So that really led to turmoils and a push for reform of work laws and conditions. And there were disparities between rich and poor, debates about nature of democracy. This was, by the way, when people even not owning land were allowed to vote, in the UK, for example. And a few years later, the women. So they actually say this in one sentence, this were like those were quite substantial struggles actually in the UK and in Europe as a continent, if you want. In other places, those are still existing struggles, right? So then you had industrial democrats versus realist democrats, and this was quite interesting. After the First World War, the motion was that the World War was fought for democracy. Now what was quite ironic is most of the soldiers had fought for democracy and went back home and went into a very kind of steep hierarchical organization to work basically under a very clear rule, right? So that was something that they kind of thought like, wow, maybe we have more rebellion if that happens. So there was a debate about management-employee relations, and that was kind of realist Democrats' view of administrative elite versus a democracy within the organization. So this was the idea, making every employee kind of a shareholder of the company. Yeah? And by the way, this has been reinvented 20 years ago, and for some companies this really works well. For others, we still have the administrative elite. Yeah? And simple, if you look at it, this administrative elite was a lot easier to kind of govern for all the company owners. Yeah? So there was, of course, a huge political intent in going that route, but again. Now, Alton Mayo was kind of the first one that tried to kind of bring an empiri into productivity and performance arguments. So Mayo viewed industrial work as an alienating notion, and he established a need for psychologically adjust workers to work and develop cooperative systems in the workplace through administrative elite who could shape workers' attitudes. Now, this sounds quite hard. He didn't think of like changing workers per se. This was like kind of creating a work environment in collaboration with the worker where you actually arrive at a place that you want to go to and can work happily in there. And this is where the happiness studies came from that we discussed last week. Now, the Hasron studies are actually some of the employees that kind of question scientific management. There was literally no effect, and this is very heartbreaking for anybody, that a nice manager creates better productivity than a tough manager. Yeah, so there's just very little empathy, but if you're interested in this, read the chapter. This is chapter 4 in the book, and for us, this is a motivation section. This is chapter 4 as well. Yeah, so this is a leadership motivation. Now, I'm running out of time. I want you for today to work really in your free time, if you're staying here, through the handbook. Yeah? So download the doc file, right, from the handbook, and make sure you're working through chapter 3 and chapter 4, and make sure that you develop in parallel your paper. So we are coming now to different methods of analyzing primary data. Yeah, you will see some are just questions. Now those could be your interview questions for 1 or 2 people that you want to interview, and then look as well at prioritization. Do they actually prioritize as the leadership series have done? We come here as well to motivational series. For example, X and Y, so hygiene factors. So this will be explained in the handbook, so don't panic. Yeah? So once you work through the chapter, you will see the examples. And they kind of guide you to kind of thinking about how can you as a leader potentially work with your team to motivate them. Yeah? What makes your team actually tick? Yeah? And there are many different situations, so teams can be completely different. Yeah? And that is maybe another factor to consider. Yeah? Okay, any questions so far? Okay, once again, yeah, I'm not too well, so today we don't have a seminar. So communicate that as well to fellow students if you see them in the following sessions. No seminars between 3 and 5. I will send Michelle around anyway to just make sure if somebody turns up to tell them. Yeah, but if you see them before, there's no seminars, but use the time to work through the student handbook. So you should really have already started your paper, right? You want to kind of finalize your literature review, kind of come up with a question or identify a literature piece that you want to analyze critical. Yeah? So there may be existing questions that you want to ask somebody, or that you have work experience in where you want to describe your work experience against to compare. Yeah, if you have something like this, this is the right stage to be at. Yeah? We have 2 weeks before we are submitting, right? Yeah. Not to create any panic. Yeah. It's not that much. Yeah. So keep in mind we are targeting at something between 2,500 in my mind, and not more than 4,500, please. Yeah. So as long as we can arrive somewhere in between there, then I'm very happy. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Super. Then thank you very much. Make sure you get this by the book, if you can. So it's online available. Have a look at it because it explains the background. So at that point, it's not too critical yet.